What is up, and welcome to another edition of the Bruin Bible. Will Decker, your host. Make sure you guys are liking and subscribing the podcast. We are brought to you guys today by our advertisers. Our advertisers are Bell to Bell Fitness, Shea Tor, a realtor out in Arizona, former Bruin alum, and my main man Howard Chang, a realtor right here in Los Angeles. Let's go through them, guys. Bell to Bell Fitness is a boxing gym on the West Coast used by their FIT acronym, Fight Inspired Training. My main man, Tony Gonzalez, was the boxing coach for UCLA for over 10 years. He has built this gym on the West Side to learn how to boxing, stay in shape, and get you all the essentials you need to become somebody that is obsessed with boxing and fitness. Make sure to check it out. Go into Bell to Bell Fitness and say you heard about it from the Bruin Bible, and you're going to get a free session with Tony Gonzalez. So make sure to check that out. Shea Tor, my main man. Shea Tor is a licensed real estate agent in Arizona and a lifelong Bruin. He's a current Wooden Athletic Fund donor and football season ticket holder. When not selling houses or going to UCLA games, he loves to travel the country, checking out different arenas, ballparks, and stadiums. If you're looking to make the move to Arizona or know someone who is, please reach out to our loyal friend, Mr. Shea Tor. His phone number is 602-487-3975. Once again, his number is 602-487-3975. Make sure to check that out. And then the local realtor we got out here, Howard Chang. Howard Chang is a local realtor with the Serene team at eXp Realty. Their team has an office right here in Culver City, though they help clients buy and sell homes all over the LA County and the surrounding areas. Howard and his team do a ton of business and are super in tune with the market, knowing winning strategies to give their clients a competitive advantage. Have amazing vendor referrals, are a one-stop shop for anything real estate, and just provide a ton of value for their clients. Howard and his partner, Kyle Draper, are UCLA alums and a huge fans of the UCLA football and basketball programs. You will often see them at games, tailgating and networking, and staying involved with the UCLA alumni community. They would love to help any fellow alumni with accomplishing their real estate goals. So if you guys have any real estate needs in the LA area, look no further. Howard is your guy. All right, guys, we're going to go into the episode. Man, what is up? It is a Wednesday evening, hump day. We are officially halfway through the week. Will Decker here with the main man, the madman in the building. And we're going to have a lot of fun today as we're talking about our favorite group. You're sick of hearing it. We're sick of hearing it. But we're going to be talking about the Big Ten rankings. I think it'll be a lot of fun to kind of break down our competitors and which receiving rooms are the best. And, we did a little prep work for this. We think it's going to be an interesting conversation. I definitely put in some hours looking at who would be the best receiving cores in which situations. Talk to me, man. This is one we've kind of circled for a while. We're finally getting it done. There's a lot of excitement coming with these receiver rankings, brother.
No question, bro. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. I think this is maybe the most intriguing position group of the entire conference because I think this is where that juxtaposition of the Big Ten expansion really takes off, right? Because when you historically think about the Big Ten, you think about a conference that's more predicated on the trenches, on running the football, controlling tempo, controlling line of scrimmage. And then when you think about the Pac-12 and West Coast football and Pac-12 After Dark, you think about all kinds of athletes on the outside, speed guys, fast twitch guys, and just a verticality to it. Now, the truth is there's plenty of Pac-12 teams the last couple of years that have been power teams, i.e. UCLA, and certainly more than a few Big Ten teams that can kind of go aerial with it. So I think overlaying both of those types of teams now in the receiving room, I think is going to really unlock a lot of insights and awareness about the conference in a very special way. And then Thriller, hey, we get to talk Bruin ball. So what's better than that? Nothing. And we get to talk about, if not our favorite position group, certainly tied for the lead with the secondary. It's either receivers or the secondary. Let's throw the dice in the air and see where it falls, because invariably it's one of those two.
I want everyone to, quiet what they're doing. An announcement is to be made. This is the best secondary group UCLA's ever had. No, I'm just playing. But I think it's going to be better. I say that every year, and hopefully I'm right at one of these times. I'm just throwing darts at a dartboard. But this is going to be a blast, dude. And I had some teams. You could tell me if some of these teams may have made your list. I had two teams on the outside looking in. And the two teams for me that came very close to making it, did not ultimately make the list, was Indiana and Penn State. Penn State, I'll start with them first. Julian Fleming, former five-star guy, transferred from Ohio State to Penn State. You got Harrison Wallace and Tyler Johnson coming there. But you lose Keandre Lambert-Smith to Auburn. That was a huge transfer. Their leading pass catcher leaves in the spring portion, goes there. And Theo Johnson gets drafted by the New York Giants at the tight end position. You couple that with Fleming, it's very similar to what Jameson Williams went through, where it's like he's talented, but he just could not get on the field at Ohio State. And granted, it worked out great for Jameson Williams. He was one of the best at Alabama in recent memory at the wide receiver position. But I don't think that's an every time rule. There's exceptions to every rule, and I think that was the case with Jameson Williams. Fleming's talented, but we just haven't seen it yet, and I can't really hang my hat on that to make it in the top five. So that's a team that's on the outside looking in. And then just with Indiana, they had their top pass catcher coming back from within the program. They add Chaz Surratt, who's coming from James Madison, 1,000-yard receiver. That's a big jump to D1. I don't know if I could put it there. And you couple that with Curtis Rourke, the starting quarterback, the presumptive starting quarterback in Indiana. This guy's jumping from MAC to the Big Ten. And, from a program that just had a similar scenario where we had Colin Schlee come from the MAC to the Pac-12, that was an enormous jump. And it just looked like Colin Schlee was a fish out of water when he was not scrambling with the football last year. So those are the two teams that I had on the way out. Did you have either of those teams in the top five?
I didn't, Will. And so I think we were in total agreement there. And it's very interesting. Penn State, I was flirting with it, though, Yeah, and so exactly as you described. And I think invariably the fact that Fleming is unproven on paper, it looks like it could be a really nice fit, especially with Drew Allar at quarterback and expecting big things there in terms of that connection. But I think until you sort of see it on the field, I just think this conference is so deep at the receiver position that you're always going to kind of go with old reliable and the proven guys over the ones that maybe there's some question marks. And how loaded, I mean, every time you say that, Will, or I hear it in other contexts, I mean, how loaded is Ohio State? And not to sort of precursor it, but Jameson Williams couldn't break in Ohio State, and he ends up being the leading receiver at Alabama, basically the best receiver on a national championship team, and he couldn't crack the top four in the receiving room in Ohio State. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. So in that regard, Fleming, is coming from a terrific lineage, because even if you can't crack the top 3 or 4 at Ohio State, you probably can still be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. So, I think some real great opportunity there for Penn State. But to your point, I think until you see it on the field, I think the top 5 is a proven group.
Yeah, well, let's get to number 5. I'm going to let you start us off, man. Your 5th ranked wide receiver group when it comes to Big Ten football in 2024 is?
Oh, you know where I'm going with it, and we're staying home. It's the Bruins of UCLA, okay? Whoa. I think that this is a unit here, Will, that is going to shock a lot of people. I think the way we both are always so high on the secondary year over year, I mean, this could be a spectacular group. And when you talk about first-round player in J. Michael Sturdivant, and I think his ability to separate on the outside, we saw it last year, begging for more balls for him, but also now his ability to kind of go across the middle, Will. We saw some really nice, tough plays from J. Mike over the course of spring as well as in the fall. Very excited about that. Then, of course, you've got my guy, Rico Flores. Can't wait to see him put it all out there when it comes for real. A Calvin Ridley type of body, a guy who just knows how to get open, twitchy, incredible route tree. And then I think everything that I saw from TMA last week, Will, was just staggering, and especially that connection with Ethan Garbers and just his ability to get open and find crevices in the defense. And he just sort of has a knack and a connection with Ethan Garbers, and those being the top 3. And then you forget about leading receiver Logan Loya, 59 catches, 655 yards, 4 touchdowns. And Will, he's not really cracking the first string. I mean, come on, And so when you've got Loya there as your 4th best receiver, I mean, it's absolutely staggering. And then let's go to 5 and 6, guys that you and I both love. Quasi Gilmer, and Braden Pagan. I mean, my God, all these guys do is just sort of dominate in terms of spring practice, and you're sort of wondering where are they going to be on the field. I mean, Pagan kind of reminds me of a slightly shorter version of Danny Farmar. I mean, he really does in terms of his ability to get open, that catch radius. He's almost got like that volleyball-esque frame and just knows how to be athletic and get open. It's remarkable. And then, of course, as we referenced, we've heard it from so many folks, Quasi Gilmore, those flashes of Freddie, the Freddie flashes of Freddie Mitchell 2.0. And when you're saying these are receivers 5 and 6 in your wide receiver room, I mean, this is a top 5 receiving room in the Big Ten, Will, and I might actually be underselling them at 5, as crazy as that sounds. But I think the sky is the absolute limit for our Bruins of UCLA in the receiving room.
You want to hear something nuts? I had them in the top 5, not at 5, not at 4. I had them at number 3, dude. And maybe I'm close to the situation, but hear me out. You made so many great points. I think J. Mike is a star, and I think we're going to see it this year. He's finally got his solidified quarterback one. Him and Garbers clearly have some serious chemistry. 4 catches, 142 yards, and a touchdown in a half. Not even a full game. A half of that bowl game. We know what Logan Loya is if he gets on the field with the starters. That's a big question. Rico's a future pro. You got Titus, who is always open. It's Death, Taxes, and Titus TMA going to be open in the middle of the field. I mean, we saw it at practice. There's a reason, Garbers loves this kid. But the reason I really like this is Eric Bieniemy's offense. This is a pass-first offense. I'm looking for a receiving core to put up the stats to match up the talent level. And there's going to be some spots in here where maybe you think some teams are too low with the talent level, but you got to put up the stats to match it. This is a pass-first offense now with Eric Bieniemy. We don't have 1,000-yard rushers. We've talked about this with the Chiefs, man. Your Kareem Hunts, your Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's, Antonio Gibson with the Commanders last year. There was not a team in the NFL that threw more than the Commanders last year with Eric Bieniemy. So you couple that with what we think is a very deep group, and if someone were to get injured, Logan Loya is number 4. I know this guy can be good. He was our leading receiver last year. Quasi Gilmore looks like he has the highest ceiling of maybe anyone in the receiving room. And then Braden Pagan, just a practice all-star. He's just begging to get on the football field. It's just been such deep of a group. I think it's going to be number 3. So I love the point, man. So I've got UCLA in my top 5. I might be a little more optimistic than most, but that is my 3rd team in the Big Ten when it comes to wide receiver rankings. I love it, man. I got to hear your number 4 to follow that up because UCLA is getting me pumped up here, man.
No doubt, brothers. And I think number 4, Will, I'll be honest with you, is kind of side by side. I got the team across town at number 4, and when you look at kind of what USC has, very similar. And I think that it's, the depth, the versatility, the athleticism. I think big things are expected across town. You start with Zachariah Branch, who, I think the best version of Zachariah Branch could be some hybrid between Reggie Bush and Tyreek Hill. I mean, it's sort of a scary best version of Branch, for sort of the rest of that conference. He's still trying to figure out kind of who he is. But my God, Will, all the pieces are there. And then you couple that with, again, another rising sophomore in Mekhi Lemon, who blew up in that Holiday Bowl game. He looks every bit the part of being able to be an incredible slot receiver, but also someone that can sort of stretch the field. Then you sort of extend even further, Will, and you've got this interesting hybrid athlete, freak athlete, Deuce Robinson, sort of part wide receiver, part tight end. Really kind of an interesting body altogether. I mean, it's sort of a Kyle Pitts meets, Shannon Sharp meets Aaron Judge. I mean, it's just a very unique body and a ton of athleticism there. And I think the guy across town that actually has the highest ceiling of them all is another rising sophomore, Jacoby Lane. And you're talking about a guy 6'5", long as can be. I mean, this is sort of a better version of Dwayne Jarrett. I think a more nimble version potentially of a Mike Williams as well. And so that's your sort of front 4. All of them are rising sophomores. You sort of piggyback that with some veterans that they got coming back and the likes of Hudson and others. And this is a very stacked receiving core. I think, Will, this Victory Bell game potentially, I mean, you talk about UCLA's receiving core going up against the SC receiving core. We saw fireworks in that Victory Bell game 2 years ago, kind of the DTR Caleb showdown. This has sort of all the makings when you think about Garbers versus Miller Moss and all the weapons that are going to be there. So I give the slight edge to SC over UCLA in terms of 4 versus 5, just because I think there's a little bit more athletic variety in that SC room, but not by much. So it's kind of 5 and 4, and I think it's going to be really dynamite.
Yeah, and I just think, you're a big pedigree guy. Deuce Robinson was the number 1 tight end in the recruiting class that he was a part of. And, I mean, he averaged 22 yards a catch last year, 44-yard touchdown in the Holiday Bowl. Jacoby Lane, 3 catches, 60 yards, and not 1 but 2 touchdowns in the Holiday Bowl itself with Miller Moss. The chemistry's already there with those guys. And, listen, guys, I am a UCLA homer. I will root for them. You guys know I do the Bruin Bible. Zachariah Branch is a star in the making. The guy I actually see, and I know everyone goes to Reggie Bush because the way he moves on the punt returns. I see a lot of Marquise Lee, man. Just lot of Marquise Lee, frame shit, size, just the way he is kind of built, the way he runs his routes. Marquise Lee was a problem at USC. He was one of the best receivers that's ever been there. Yeah, so that's kind of the comp I would say if he is to reach his ceiling at USC, because he is so explosive. So you pair that with a Lincoln Riley-led passing attack. I mean, this is a recipe for disaster for defenses. So that's going to be interesting. I have them at number 4 as well. I got to give you my number 5. I never got into it, so I'm going to go with the 5th team. The team I actually am really liking as a sleeper in the Big Ten is Wisconsin, man. I think Luke Fickell, there was not a hotter coaching name in college football than Luke Fickell 2 years ago. I mean, this guy led Cincinnati to the 4-team playoff, not even the 12th team, the 4-team playoff. You bring this in. Will Pauling is a legit stud, a guy who followed him from Cincinnati to Wisconsin, 74 catches, 837 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And then you pair that with 2 other transfers, Bryson Green. This guy has, close to 80-plus catches in his career. He's averaging 15 yards a catch. 6'2" guy from Oklahoma State. Mike Gundy can build receivers. So if he was good enough for Mike Gundy, those Dez Bryants, those Justin Blackmon type of players, he's good enough for a lot of people around the country. I'm a buyer in Bryson Green. And then C.J. Williams, the former USC transfer, now at Wisconsin. He was a 4-star talent coming out of Mater Dei area. This guy can legitimately play. So when you have those 3, you complement that with Tyler Van Dyke coming from Miami. This guy is a legitimate veteran within the game. And Phil Longo being the offensive coordinator. Phil Longo, North Carolina. Who are the last 2 quarterbacks he mentored at North Carolina? Sam Howell, who was a hell of a college quarterback there. And then Drake May, the best version we saw of Drake May was with Phil Longo. Last year, he kind of regressed a little bit as Phil Longo went to, Wisconsin. But Phil Longo with Van Dyke and those trio of receivers, I'm buying it. What do you think about Wisconsin, man?
Well, I'll be, it's so funny because I actually, our 5 and our 3 was flipped. I actually had Wisconsin as a sleeper 3, and I'll tell you why, and I'll for exactly the reasons that you described, because so much of the receiving game is sort of predicated on the ability to have space in the open field to be effective. And if you look at the receivers that you mentioned, Will, in particular, that trio, they're space eaters. And so it's a completion, it's a quarterback sort of completion dream, right? Like, what was sort of the challenge a little bit with UCLA last year in the receiving? Why wasn't J. Mike getting the ball enough? Why wasn't, Keegan Jones getting the ball enough? On the SC side, there was similar complaints. Why wasn't Zachariah Branch enough in the offensive game? Why was he just a special teamer? Because so much of it is also predicated on style of quarterback and quality of offensive line, right? We always said if offensive line is stabilized, that is going to allow J. Mike to be able to get more touches, be more involved. But when you look at the Wisconsin receivers, they are just as effective catching the short ball as they are the intermediate or the long ball. So in that regard, they're even sort of more versatile and resilient to an offensive line. And then when you sort of couple that, Will, I think Van Dyke is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in college football when he is trained appropriately. And when you talk about that run game at Wisconsin and then the play action, the boot game that you can do, and then you sort of couple that with guys that are open, and Van Dyke is very good in terms of throwing the ball on the run. I think just that whole collective ecosystem, when you put all of those pieces together, it's going to be a wildly effective receiving core. And I think so many people right now think of Wisconsin as the team that runs the ball 45 times a game. I think Paul Chris is going to come in there and really, really surprise, from that Paul Chris pedigree. They're going to come in really surprise people with Fickell. And I think that's going to really create a situation where this team is going to be flying under the radar and a top 5 offense in the Big Ten. So I had some fun with it, Will, but I got actually Scotty at number 3.
I love it, dude. Yeah, this grouping is underrated. And, Phil Longo comes from the Mac Brown tree, man. Like, people will forget today, if you're just kind of following college football in the last 5 to 6 years, Mac Brown was in that group of like Pete Carroll, Urban Meyer in the mid-2000s,
Totally.
Nick Saban. He was one of the best coaches within all of college football. And you see what he's doing. I mean, he doesn't have anywhere near the resources he had at Texas. And he's put 2 quarterbacks in the NFL as high draft picks, with the North Carolina. So Mac Brown's doing his thing, and Phil Longo is a huge part of that. So getting Luke Fickell on the defensive side of things, he's a very much defensive-minded head coach. With Phil Longo as the offense, I'm a buyer on Wisconsin. I think they're an underdog. They're going to have a chance to prove it this year. They actually play Alabama out of conference. And, man, I'm a DeBoer believer, but it's going to take a little while to kind of get up to speed there at Bama. Who knows? Wisconsin could be the sleeper team, maybe not even in the Big Ten, but all of college football if they get things right within the sport. So I'm very, very pumped for that. So we have the same top 5 through 3, just different orders. So,
and I think we're going to have the same 1 and 2 too.
we have to. I know where we're going with this. So I have Wisconsin 5. I've got USC 4, and I've got UCLA 3. You have UCLA 5.
We have USC 4, Wisconsin 3. We're actually just sort of flipped. Our 3 to 5 is just a mirror image. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, man. Great minds think alike, dude. I love it. 2 and 1. You guys know who these teams are, but it'll be interesting to see where we place them. Number 2, who do you got for me, my guy?
I got Oregon. Will, I think that's kind of the team for me when you just look at just the plethora of talent on in that wide receiver room, and it's the combination of some of the guys that they got coming back from last year, and then you just look at just the depth that they have lined up between the transfer portal and then between the pure the pure recruiting, in terms of this class as well as the next class. Well, I just think it's going to be frightening to see this unit. And I think they've got speed. I think they've got size. I think they've got possession guys. They got guys that can blow the top off. They got guys that you can run bubble screens with. They have a little bit of everything. You can go 5 wide with them. You can go 2 wide and 2 tight ends. I mean, it's just everything that you can do. And then when you sort of couple that with the fact that you've got Dylan Gabriel at quarterback, a guy who's now so experienced, having played at Central Florida, having played at Oklahoma, kind of chip on his shoulder, his last go around in college football. And then you sort of couple that with Dan Lanning, who it looks every bit like he's ready to make that ultimate jump into true national contention. Will, for me, it's Oregon all day.
Well, man, I actually have Oregon number 1, and I will sell you on the Ducks being number 1. So here's my thought. So you have Ohio State number 1.
Correct.
Obviously, right? Here's my thought process on it. Can you hear me clearly? I'll edit this part out.
Totally.
Gotcha. So here's my theory on this. As great as Ohio State's receiving room is, Emeka Egbuka, maybe the first receiver taken off the board next draft. Jeremiah Smith, my God, this guy looks like Adrian Peterson reincarnated at the wide receiver position. Peterson is the only true freshman that I've ever seen where I was like, you can take this 18-year-old, pluck him up, and put him on an NFL team, and nothing really changes. He'd be a star in the NFL. Jeremiah Smith is getting that same type of praise before he's even played a game. So, I mean, you look at what this kid is capable of doing. I think he can already squat 500+ pounds. He had the second fastest, miles per hour on the team of anybody in the spring portal. So you have that. You got Carnell Tate coming back. The reason I don't have them number 1 is I think they're going to be a run-first team with Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. We know Chip Kelly, man. If he can run the ball 5-6 yards a carry, the opportunity to pass there may not be as much. Will Howard's transferring in there, and, I know Dylan Gabriel's transferring there as well. But Howard is more of that kind of dual threat type of guy. Kansas State kind of mucks it up. You remember Colin Klein and these guys?
Totally.
They can escape, very Cam Rising-ish, where they'll get like a 30-yard run and kind of keep it moving. I just think for what this team is, and for them to get over the hump against Michigan, which is a run-first team, they're going to adopt that identity with the best backfield in the entire country, in my opinion, with Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. So nothing against Ohio State, but here's why I got Oregon. Dylan Gabriel, this guy has a chance to be, statistically speaking, the greatest passer of all time when he retires, man. He's 4,500 yards away from, Case Keenum's yard record, and I think he's 30 touchdowns away from his touchdown passing record. Tez Johnson is the only receiver with Oregon and Ohio State that is a returning 1,000-yard receiver from last year. So I got a big fan of Tez. He's a transfer from Troy, 82 catches last year. Evan Stewart, a 5-star talent there as well. We know what he was. He was the number 1 wide receiver in the transfer portal. He's going to put up big-time stats. They've recruited like crazy, so their 3, 4, and 5 is probably as good as anyone else's in development in the portal there. So I just think for what it is, and Will Stein calling the plays, I mean, man, Bo Nix, they changed Bo Nix maybe more than any college quarterback I can remember. I got to roll with the Ducks, man, just because I know Dylan Gabriel offense is going to be pass first and the stats will be backing it up. I think if you're looking back at the talent level and who makes a difference in the NFL, those Ohio State guys will be better. But for this year, I'm going with Oregon. Do you think that's a fair point?
A totally fair point, Will. I think, it's so astute. And in a lot of ways, the reason you are picking Ohio State over Oregon in 1-2 is actually very similar reasons as to why I'm sort of picking Wisconsin over even SC and UCLA at 3, right? It's what is the overarching system in which these guys are going to thrive. And look, Johnson and Stewart, Will, I think is, if not the best, one of the 2 or 3 best pure 1-2 combinations at the wide receiver position, not just this year, but the last maybe 2 years, before we had kind of those iconic kind of Alabama receiving teams and those LSU receiving teams and whatnot. So I think this is going to be an incredible year. Stewart, this feels like a big breakout year for him, right? I mean, kind of one of the most decorated recruits, 5-star, A&M. It never quite materialized the way you wanted to, but you get the feeling that Dylan Gabriel and that system is going to unlock him. Johnson is coming off of, like you said, 82 catches. So, I mean, that's a staggering number at the collegiate level. So I have no issue with being Oregon 1, Ohio State 2. Will, it's sort of the equivalent of trying to find a pimple on Miss America. I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at right now. The only reason I sort of like Ohio State is just the freakish athleticism of these guys and sort of the depth. So you sort of get enamored. And one prediction I'm going to make, Will, I think Ohio State is going to be the first team in the last 20 years to have 2 1,000-yard rushers and 2 1,000-yard receivers same season. Wow. And the team that came perilously close to that was actually 2005 USC, when Bush and White ran for over 1,000. Jared went for over 1,000 as a receiver, and Steve Smith finished with like 975 or something. It was sort of 25 yards away from being able to do that. But I think, to your point, Ohio State is going to have a heavy run emphasis, but I think there's going to be an incredible amount of balance. And look, as polarizing as this is, Will, we felt the wrath, we felt the pain, the rise and the demise of the Chip Kelly era at UCLA. The last 2 guys on the island, we were on Survivor Island, you and I, Gilligan 1 and Gilligan 2, or Tweedledee and Tweedledum, pick your favorite duo. We were sort of on the last island there, but I have to believe that with all of those weapons, I think Chip Kelly is going to do some impressive things at Ohio State. So just the freakish athleticism, and I think what Chip is going to do with all of these chess pieces, and in a lot of ways, having the run set up the pass on some of these play action deep balls and some of these stack formations is why I just aesthetically like Ohio State. But I completely agree and understand the argument to have Oregon 1. I think it's fair to say, Will, that I think those 2 receiving cores, as well as those 2 offenses, in terms of polish and overall roster, feel a cut above everybody else in the Big Ten. And I think everyone else is kind of trying to play a little bit of catch up, certainly can. But it feels like those two are kind of leading out of the gate. And my God, October 12th, those two are going to play each other. I mean, in what could be the game of the year in the regular season in college football.
And here's the thing, man. If you were just asking me who's more talented, it's Ohio State. Oregon's number 2. They're close. I'm looking at, and maybe it's that time of year, it's fantasy football time of year, right? I'm looking at who's getting the catches, who's getting the yards, who's going to put up the points and the stats to back it up. That's Oregon for me, just because that Ohio State backfield, man, that could be the most special backfield since Lendale and Reggie for that team across town. Like, that is how special that that backfield could be. And we just know Chip Kelly, like, if he can run the ball for 6 or 7 yards and not throw a pass, he's the type of coordinator that wants to do that stuff. So it's so close. It's picking Knicks right there at the end. But man, this was a fun exercise to say the least, guys. College football is going to be back in about 2 weeks, and I am ecstatic. Guys, thank you for listening to the Bruin Bible. We will be back next week. We're going to try to get a guy that knows Hawaii a little bit well to come in and talk to us about Hawaii and what we can expect from game number 1. So stay tuned for that. Have a good one. Bruin Bible, we are officially out.